Greetings, everyone. My name is David Haug. I'm the Director for Embedded Safety Critical here at Parasoft, and it is my humble pleasure to be able to host a panel today on how to mitigate cybersecurity software vulnerabilities in medical devices. Today's discussion will be in panel forum, and like you, I have signed up for webinars and events that have really interesting titles and great subtopics, and you end up spending your time listening to a vendor talk for 40 minutes about how a few features of theirs apply to that particular topic. Today is not that day. Today will be a very interactive discussion with subject matter experts. And because this is not about me, I will stop showing my camera and I will introduce the panel. It is my humble privilege and honor to introduce this esteemed group of colleagues. Seth Carmody is the Vice President of Regulatory Strategy at MedCrypt. MedCrypt is a San Diego-based company that provides proactive security for healthcare technology. Prior to MedCrypt, Seth worked as a cybersecurity program manager and policy architect at the US FDA. I would guess that having experience with the FDA is probably pretty important to today's topic. Seth brings over 9 years of experience in guiding medical device cybersecurity strategy. So welcome, Seth. Thank you for joining us on this panel discussion today. Next, also fairly well known in this industry, and as a guy who wrote a book about it, Christopher Gates. He is the Director of Product Security at Velentium. Christopher oversees the company's product cybersecurity division. He interacts with regulatory and standards bodies on a frequent basis to define better tools, techniques, and processes for the medical device industry to enable the creation of secure products. Christopher's long-term goal is to educate the entire medical device industry in best practices for embedded cybersecurity. And he's on a long way to doing that as one of the authors to the book, Medical Device Cybersecurity for Engineers and Manufacturers. Welcome, Chris, and I'm glad that you're with us today. Next, I'd like to introduce Seth Carmody. He is the Director of Systems Engineering at Velentium. He has over 20 years of engineering experience with 10 years in medical device development and testing. He also spent 2 years at BSI, which is the British Standards Institute, as a subject matter expert and product reviewer. He has passion for efficient development lifecycle, test-driven, and CI/CD methodologies. Seth is also delivering Parasoft training as part of the Embedded Cybersecurity Training and Certification Program at Velentium. We love Seth here at Parasoft. Thank you, Seth, for joining. Glad that you're with us as well. And I'd also like to introduce my friend and colleague, Andre Madan. He is the lead solution architect at Parasoft. Andre helps clients to identify best testing strategies for embedded applications which satisfy critical quality expectations and safety security compliance standards. Prior to joining Parasoft, Andre spent 10 years at Medtronic, architecting, developing embedded systems and corresponding test environments for life-critical implantable pacemakers and defibrillators. So today we've got a great panel of folks who have real experience in the industry, and they're all extremely excited to talk about how cybersecurity is evolving in this world. So with that, let me end my screen sharing. This will not be a lot of slides today. I believe it has stopped. But I don't actually know. I'm assuming it has stopped. With that, let me begin with some of our questions. So with that, Seth, let me address you first. Given your current role at MedCrypt and your recent experience at the FDA, what, in your opinion, makes medical device security hard, and what can practitioners and vendors do to improve?
Yeah, one of the things that, I actually left the FDA about a year ago, which, given under current conditions, seems like either somewhere between 10 years and 1 week ago. Since I left, what I wanted to do was is step way back, and in a strategy role, I was able to do that and say, let's take a survey of what's going on, like what's going on specifically within the medical device space, but let's take also a sort of look at healthcare overall, and ask the question, just as Professor Ross Anderson asked in 2000 of information security and why is it hard. I said, why is healthcare security so hard? So the last year, 2020, and into this year, 2021, I've basically said, okay, let's look at the factors that contribute to what makes this industry so hard. And eventually, it's an economic story, right? That in the end of the day, that healthcare is in the business of healthcare, right? That is their primary objective and responsibility. And when we think about healthcare technology, everybody in that supply chain is optimized for delivering healthcare features. If you don't deliver healthcare features, you're not going to be in business very long. So when you try to shoehorn in, or whatever implement you choose to squeeze in some additional scope to healthcare, and this being security, you have a whole bunch of residual issues that come up. One of them is, in particular, and fascinating, if you want to learn more about it, feel free to reach out to me, is that the FDA model, in particular the medical device model, is based in a pill model, a white pill that's made and deterministic and static, and then is never designed to be changed. And that is actually the model that was assumed by the medical device industry back in 1976. And that has a whole host of downstream ramifications, particularly with cybersecurity, but other emerging technologies like AI and machine learning. But specifically, I can concisely say that that pill model actually is optimized everything in the medical device manufacturing space for the time of sale. And this has, as you can imagine, that cybersecurity lives far beyond the time of sale and has actually disincentivized lots of good practices that happen after the fact. And my time at the FDA was spent trying to catalyze the transformation and sort of retrofit of that pill model for the medical device manufacturers. So take home point here is, what can we do as practitioners? It's one of the reasons why I left to go to MedCrypt, is because I felt like if we could make it easier, right, that let healthcare focus on healthcare and deliver security features, let them integrate and implement essentially flawlessly and seamlessly into that healthcare technology. So let them focus on the healthcare features. We'll focus on the security features. That was the solution.
Thank you, Seth. I'm still figuring out my mechanics here. Thank you so much.
Oh, no.
Yeah, great. Let me turn, Chris. It's 2021. How can medical device manufacturers still be surprised they need to create secure devices? I wonder if you could talk about that for a moment.
Yeah, it's a weekly occurrence for me as I onboard new clients, and it's a very sad thing. I mean, arguably since 2014, when the first pre-market guidance on medical device cybersecurity came out, although that was a horrible document, it still should have been the wake-up call. Oh, it was, Seth. Oh, it was.
It was a beginning document. It was a start. It was a start, Chris.
It was, and really the reason is the FDA was so used to not being prescriptive in what their expectations were. They missed an opportunity to convey what their expectations were to the medical device industry. And instead, they basically said, your medical devices should be secure, okay? And, you know, puppies are cute, we like unicorns, and good luck to you. We're not giving you clues to what we need. Now, in the intervening between that and 2018, when the next version of the guidance came out, I saw 483s, pre-sub meeting minutes, rejections, all that, in which they were extremely detailed as to why you are failing this, why you did the wrong thing. And it's like, then, and Seth, I'm going to give you big kudos for this. This was during your tenure there. You created the 2018 draft guidance on pre-market cybersecurity, a much better document. Yeah, the formatting was hosed up, but okay. But other than that, you kept with the same old formatting. But the content is what matters. But literally, the content in there now conveys what the FDA's expectations are for the medical device manufacturers. That has been a huge sea change of what I've seen. Pre that guidance, everybody was going, well, we don't really need to do security. We don't know how to do it. It's hard. We were never trained in it. All very true, but they were looking for any excuse not to adopt another ism that they have to allow for. So now that what we're seeing going forward is since that document, and I credit you tremendously for that, Seth. So while I downplayed the 2014 one, the 2018 one was great. It now has really raised awareness. I'm still seeing people, and I mean, I do these kind of talks all the time. Even now, more so it used to be in the before times, I would, do it, kind of monthly. Now it seems like weekly I'm doing these talks. And I still run into the medical device manufacturer who's coming to me because the FDA, they put in a pre-sub and a pre-market submission. And the FDA came back with, 24 questions for them. And they're like, we don't even know what these terms mean. And it's like, how can this still be a thing? I've gotten to the point now where I find these folks, I ask them, so they're pretty much everywhere these days. I'm sort of sick of seeing myself in all these locations. Which one did I miss? What do you people do that that venue wasn't on my list to present to you and raise your awareness? It is amazing to me the intentional part of we're just not going to look at this and therefore it's going to go away. Well, I got news for you. It's not. Seth's old comrades are getting much more pedantic. Okay, especially in this new year. This last couple of months, it has ramped up tremendously. And I can only see this year it even getting more. Wait till they finally turn on the refuse to accept checklist that's going to have all the cybersecurity items on it so that your submission won't even reach a reviewer. It's going to be killed by a clerk on the way in. That's the kind of stuff we need. That's the kind of stuff we need to see. And we're starting to see this now coming back. And of course, the MDMs are screaming, but it's like, I'm sorry, you've had years. The fact of your willful ignorance, not paying attention to what's changed in the industry, that's not the case. Now, and here I'm going to plug our training that we do. Part of what I'm doing here, wrote the book with Axel Worth, great guy, and my buddy Jason from Velentium. And that was the first step. The next step was the training. And really what I'm trying to do, my big audacious goal is to train the MDMs so I can walk into any of them and have an intelligent cybersecurity discussion with any of their staff engineers. That's what I want to go. I want to take this. I understand nobody was trained in this. I understand we're way ahead of any other industry out there as far as embedded devices and security goes. Okay, Lord knows we're way beyond, voting machines, always a popular topic, automotive, okay? And they're now looking to the stuff we're doing and have done ahead of time to how to incorporate it into their domain and their industry. So I see hope here, but I'm going to keep pounding on it. And this isn't the end. I'm doing a lot more here to try to get the word out, train these people so that I don't have to go and repeat the same things over and over and over and over again to MDMs. They can have that in there. And instead they come to me for those specialty topics, those niche items of security that they need addressed. So I don't know how it can be that way still, but I'm working hard to change it.
Well, I mean, hey, Chris, I mentioned healthcare does healthcare, right? So they're focused on their healthcare objective. That's what you're seeing. But to your point, and by the way, I had help in coming up with the 2018 guidance.
You wrote it all yourself. I know you wrote it all yourself.
Didn't do it alone, but thank you. I appreciate the thoughts. Yeah, the idea that the FDA is learning actually shows you that we're moving in the right direction, and that was such an awesome part about being at the FDA and working with Suzanne Schwartz and team. They said she's a trauma burn surgeon. I'm an organic chemist. This other person over here is a mechanical engineer. We need to learn about cybersecurity. So what you see is that evolution of getting smart and observing and learning from failure, right? That's reflected everywhere.
And actually, I was quite amazed. The last time I was at Silver Springs campus in Maryland there at the FDA, this was again in the before times when we used to breathe other people's air. And I was quite impressed with the quality level of the FDA people in the room. They understood what was going on. And I've been in this industry for 49 years, creating class 3 medical devices, okay? Things that kept you alive. And so that wasn't always the case for any area of engineering, all right? And you had to, in a non-condescending tone, explain to somebody who doesn't have skills in whatever medical device you were currently trying to submit, and explain to them how it worked and educate them and bring them up to show them why it was effective and why it improved outcomes for patients. So this isn't always the way. And even cybersecurity, because it's such a rarefied field, I was very, very impressed with the quality of the folks in the room. And after we got done with the official talk, and it was all nervous and uptight as those kind of meetings are, afterwards, we all got together and started talking about it. And it was a great riffing on the subject and how we could go farther and things we could do together. And it's like, no, they've come a long way over the decades. So
yeah, some of the most fantastic people I've run into professionally work at the FDA. I felt very sort of bad for them, but knew we had the right folks during the pandemic response because they also handled that as well. So the quality of folks there that I experienced was just
right.
as you're.
Hey, and Dr. Kevin Fu is now there. Come on, the father of medical device cybersecurity.
Yeah, like just that is the arrow is pointing up, right? The center knows that cybersecurity is a fundamental, the foundation to all the things all the promise that technology holds in healthcare, and you don't go very far or have reasonable assurance of safety and effectiveness without that cybersecurity foundation.
Just a couple of points to go back to the question. What I've noticed is a very dramatic and positive culture change on both sides, right? Not to say there's sides here. 10 years ago, you bring up just simple cybersecurity conversation, and immediately it doesn't apply to us. We do healthcare. That's what we do. We have clinical functionality. We have performance metrics, but this piece doesn't apply to us. That's IT. That's infrastructure, right? And since then, the culture has changed and it's become more receptive, right? And that kudos goes to you, Seth, and to Chris to train people up to go, hey, no, this is important, right? Medical devices and healthcare is getting into the realm of IoT, right? It's getting in the realm of everything is connected now, right? Patient information is important. And then same thing from the FDA or any regulatory perspective, they're getting more knowledgeable of what this means to provide the guidance back to the industry to say, hey, we're here to help you. We're not here to make things hard on you. We want to make things easier for you to make sure you get a properly, secure device out there. And I see that change, and it's a positive change. And what we're doing at Velentium is to sort of promote that change. And I see that happen.
Yeah. Very much. And security isn't hard compared to the creation of medical devices. You look at the things we've done over the decades. No, we've allowed for the biological diversity of patients and still treat them and have a tremendous outcome of it. These devices have altered life as we know it here on this planet. There is no doubt about it. Improving the quality of life, extending life. I can't even begin to imagine. I've done 6 ventilators in my career. I'm one of the most experienced people in creating ventilators. And I can't even begin to imagine how many people are alive today because of the work I've done. And I'll never know, but it's, that is really amazing. So to say, compare that to security, nah, security is easy compared to that stuff. Okay?
Chris,
I think the point is though that what you're pointing out, Chris, is that when you specialize in something, you can achieve tremendous outcomes. And that's what I'm saying. Healthcare does healthcare. They focus on that.
Yeah.
And they can't focus on security. That is the point, right? Let you be the specialist and you specialize in security and let them continue to focus on it.
Also, Chris, understand that a lot of the products that we work on that saves people's lives, maybe a implantable pulse generator that keeps someone's heart beating. These devices are in the patient for 15, 20 years. Mm-hmm. These are mature devices, mature complex systems that have been out there for decades. For somebody to come in and go, hey, by the way, there's this thing you have to do now. That does make it hard for some people, right? That is a scary thing, and our job is to make it not scary, right? And I think that's a tough thing to do, especially when this industry, like Seth said, is that pillbox. When it's sort of, this is what it is, this is what we make, and this is what it does, and that we don't think beyond that. Yeah.
Right. Don't be afraid. We do cybersecurity. Okay.
Right.
And we're all here to help.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah. Thank you, Seth. Thank you, Seth. Very good question, which obviously goes deep. I'm not sure if my interpretation of, hey, the medical's hard, the cybersecurity should be easy, you should probably have it done next week, probably isn't the takeaway. We know that that's a challenge, but in perspective of things that matter, of course. Let me just take a moment to do a little prompt here. We've talked about the book a couple of times. Chris Gates and Jason Smith are two of the authors for the medical device cybersecurity for engineers and manufacturers. Today, to encourage you to ask some questions related to this topic, we will be giving a book away. Yes, Andre's showing his. That's just he's showing it so he can prove that he can read. But it's a fantastic book, and you can ask your question, as I mentioned, in the questions tab, and we will be giving that away based on the best question nominated by the panelists. But don't worry, we won't be getting to all the questions, I'm sure, that will be offered through this forum. We will select that after the event. So if you ask a question, make sure we have your email so that we can contact you for the book giveaway. So thank you.
And I want to point out my co-author on this as well, Axel Worth. He also works at MedCrypt with Seth. Excellent guy. Yeah, excellent. Thank you, Chris. Yeah, credit to all the authors. It's a fantastic book. So, Sat, you were talking about some of this related to how this impacts the medical device manufacturers. Let me throw a question your way, and let's talk about the code quality for a moment on medical devices. How does it differ from things in other industries? How does medical device software actually differ related to what medical device manufacturers have to do?
Yeah, sure. That's a very good question. So let's start with some of the common best practices that apply when it comes to code quality across industries, right? It doesn't matter if you're in automotive, aerospace, military, medical device, healthcare. The concepts that people typically focus inward when they're developing architectures, design, implementation are things reliability, right? Maintainability, portability, scalability, all the abilities, right? You want to make sure that your complex system, including the firmware, software components of it, are reliable. They're deterministic, right? They do what they're supposed to do all the time. They're maintainable, right? You want to make sure that 10 years down the line, when somebody else is looking at your system, it can be maintained. It's portable as industry changes, as the state of the art changes. You want to be able to port this thing to latest technologies, and it's scalable. You want to be able to add new features to it, right? So those are sort of the common things that typically people focus on. Now, what makes it different, beyond that, is the safety critical aspect, right? Healthcare, medical device is safety critical. It's safety driven, right? The top two standards that most people look at are a quality system standard and a risk management standard. Everything is the benefit risk equation, right? And more important in medical device, where it comes to other industries, say automotive, it has certain safety aspects to it. I mean, every car manufacturer touts about their safety features, right? A medical device or a medical product comes in contact with the patient directly. Their intent is to be a safety device, right? They're supposed to protect the patient. They're supposed to improve their quality of life. They might even keep the patient alive, right? So because of that, the importance of safety critical elements is important. And how do you do that? It's through code quality, right? You make sure that your quality of code is not just safe, but secure, which we'll get to, later on, I'm sure we'll into detail, right? So that's what makes it different, right? So you have to be able to show that your code, your implementation is not the sole source or direct source or even an indirect source of a failure in the system when it comes to affecting patient harm. It's not going to hurt the patient in some unknown way, or it's not going to cause clinical efficacy, right? It's not gonna go down to the place where it's meant to do this task and it just does not do that task, right? So that's kind of what makes it different, and that's why it's so important. There's many times when people say, well, my device, my firmware is insulated. I have other risk mitigations put into place, but it's always that single fault failure, right? You have to look at how that system is architected, how it's designed, right? I mean, a very kind of gross example is you have an ICD, or you have some pulse generator that's maintaining quality of life, and it just happens to randomly reset. Now, the callous response is, so what? It reset. It started running again. Yeah, but what happened when it reset? Did it Did it harm the patient in any way? Did it prevent a therapy, right, to the patient? So it is very critical to understand all these aspects. And today, in today's environment, given the way the industry has been, not just medical device, but across the board, the tool sets are much more robust than they used to be. I mean, back in the day, the compiler level, checks that we had were lint, right? You kind of linted your code and said, yeah, hey, look, everything looks shiny, we're ready to go. But now, I mean, for example, what Parasoft gives you with the static analysis tool, what it gives you for the dynamic side, where you can do unit testing and whatnot, it is extremely robust, it is extremely efficient, and it makes you more productive as an engineer, right? You want to take that responsibility off of your back to say, yeah, my system is safe, and it does what it's meant to do.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Seth. Yeah, the idea if it compiles, it's good to go is probably not enough. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, but not just that, but the old adage of happy path testing, right? I tested the known path of what it's supposed to do, and replacing that with more what I refer to as defensive coding. It's not as bad as the test-driven patterns that I like to approach, but it can be a little onerous at times. But it's kind of that mechanism is defensive driving, right? Defensive coding.
Yeah. Thank you.
That, from my opinion, the 20,000 foot view, there's two major differences. One of which is I can get out of my car. Okay.
Right.
If I've got an implantable cardiac defibrillator that Andre made, okay, and it has a problem and it can be attacked, I am my device. I'm not my car. Much as I like my car, I'm not my car.
You brought a great point that I forgot to mention is the other big difference is the form factor, right? A airplane that has safety features, redundancies, they can put in a whole bunch of things. A ICD or a pulse generator and the stack of quarters, you really have to be smart about how you design this thing, right? So there's that factor. I forgot to mention that. Thanks, Chris. But yeah.
Thank you. I'll mention, if you understood what Seth was talking about in the direction, and maybe you're asking yourself, we've got a team. Look, we're focused on healthcare. What do we do on cybersecurity? If you're not experts and you want to get some training, Velentium has embedded cybersecurity training and certification. They got it all the way from kind of like beginner level up to advanced, 3 separate courses. They also train how to use our tools, which we're very thankful for. Thank you, Seth and team, on how to apply our particular technologies in retrospect to cybersecurity within your project. So if you want to learn more about that, go to the Velentium site, and you can find out about the embedded cybersecurity training there. And Seth is mentioned as a part of the team who helps with that. So with that, let me transition and ask my next question. I guess I have to pick on my friend Andre. He's been very quiet. Although I think that Chris might have given you a jab, because I think he said it would be your defibrillator that he couldn't get out of. I don't know.
I laid the problem at his feet. Let's put it that way.
Right. Okay. So Andre, thinking about the embedded systems and thinking about security issues, one of the practices which Seth just mentioned, and I'm sure that many of the audience are familiar with, the static analysis. Can you talk a little bit about what, for a medical device related to cybersecurity, what can static analysis find? What doesn't it find? What can you give any examples? Can you talk about that for a moment?
Yeah, sure. So there is a general misconception among the engineers, I think, that if you run a tool, it will find your vulnerabilities and you fix them and you're done. The reality is not like that, right? There is no tool that you can run and it will automatically do that for you, especially in embedded systems, where I believe the cybersecurity story should start with architectural review and composing the system correctly, with security in mind first. Like security by design should come first, and then static analysis should be just maybe a little like a tool that you use to solidify certain parts of your cybersecurity process. So embedded systems naturally are different from your general computing system. There's no dynamic memory in many systems, right? They're very closed in nature. There's no user input. You cannot just type from a command line and starting accessing some files because and many times there's no file system. In many systems that I see that we work with, there's not even a TCP/IP stack, right? So communication to that system is kind of problematic. There's no web server running, right? So it's a very different nature of the beast there. And then that's why static analysis, in my opinion, has a bad rap, because people say, oh, what can be detected with static analysis? Pretty much nothing from security related, but it's not true. There are good publications there and good coding standards that have been developed. And then there's some good rules there that actually carry over from safety related checkers. Like, for example, I'm thinking like array out of bounds, like buffer overflows, right? That's a standard security or safety related problem that can potentially crash the system or get it into some sort of unknown state, which then can be exploited, right? So is that a security checker or is it a safety checker? And then another one is, right? Yes.
Yes.
It's like, yes.
Hey, Andre,
Yeah.
can I interject
Yeah,
one thing? I want to drive home this point, right? Because I think you're touching on something really important. And I think, for all the maturing that's going on right now, there's still a transition that's happening. And one of the things that I hope comes out, and I guess we're calling it draft or draft squared guidance. So the draft guidance, pre-market guidance came out in 2018. I worked on a revision a little bit before I had to recuse myself and leave the FDA. They've been working on it since. So draft or draft square is coming back out in draft. One of the things I hope that will be in that document is instead of, for some reason, focusing on the NIST cybersecurity framework, which I think is a great risk management framework, but not a framework for designing devices, I hope to see the focus and framer be secure development lifecycle, right? Because then it gets to your question, right? It's buffer overflow is a safety issue, but also then we are mandated under that framework to evaluate that buffer overflow from a security perspective, which, by the way, I have an opinion about what the relationship to security and safety is. We can talk about it later, but I think that without doing that, you have no reasonable assurance of safety and effectiveness. If you do not evaluate the buffer overflow from a security perspective, you cannot claim reasonable assurance of safety and efficacy.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Thank you. I think it was like a mini.
No. It all makes sense, right? It's not only like a buffer overflow. We can talk about, let's say, integer overflows, right? Just when you even work with the data that comes from the hardware or from the user also has to be like validated, right? It's a general principles of design that you can bake into your code when the tool would tell you, hey, you are not validating, let's say, inputs being passed into, I don't know, like a logging function. Right. So I encourage people to look at the SCI CERT security standard, which has been a good starting point for us. We fully support it. A little plug for us. Then Misra has a series of checkers there. Atazar is good for C++, a good starting point for C++ safety. So in general, yes, you can make the point that static analysis doesn't find anything, but it makes your code more robust, and it does find things that can be exploited. So
just to add to that, partnering with Parasoft, we've taken the 7,300 plus rules and checkers that Parasoft provides across various different standards and industries, and we've distilled it down to about 529 in medical device specific rules and checkers, and they kind of go across the board of mandatory, recommended, sort of the advisory, right? They kind of have their own spectrum. And at Velentium, what we've done is take that and create our own risk matrix that says that, hey, if your severity and your likelihood, whichever way, whatever you want to call it, right, whatever the probability, then this is the one you want to tackle first, right? These are the ones that you want to tackle first. It gives our clients, it gives the manufacturers a very good way of doing that benefit risk analysis. It's the same way you would do a system hazard analysis, right? That says that, hey, ROI, right? From a business perspective, MDMs want to know what's the rate of, what's the return I can get on this. If I tackle a bunch of these what we call greens, okay, great. You solve some of the minor things, but the important ones, the buffer overflows, especially when it's in an interrupt, that is related to an ECG sensing circuit that needs to respond properly. Right? So we can really target some of this static analysis for those important pieces. I just want to throw that another plug for Parasoft.
Yeah, and I want to make it clear, and in fact, for those who have read the book, I divide this up into two categories. There are design vulnerabilities and there are implementation vulnerabilities. And each of those two areas have different tools and techniques to apply to them. So during design, you would do something like, I don't authenticate a user, I don't authenticate another connecting device, I don't encrypt PHI that's going over a communication channel. That has nothing to do with how you implemented the code. That was a bad design choice that you made up front. All right.
Wait, you decided to put hard-coded passwords in? Is that a design flaw? Because I just saw that disclosure come out in a recent.
Exactly.
You mean
Exactly.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is not a good password?
Now, what Parasoft does well is cover the areas such as the SAST and also things such as boundary testing inside of each of the units and going through and doing unit testing. Those are done during implementation, and your staff engineers did bad coding constructs. Okay, so maybe you had a great design, but a bad coding construct, and those are the kind of tools that really shine a light rapidly on areas of your implementation and feed it back rapidly. By the way, we don't wait till the end after you're done with the B&V and you're about to submit. Okay, no, we do this concurrently with implementation. So you feed this stuff back immediately, and it goes back through your bug tracking system, and it incorporates into your life cycle. Security doesn't stand apart from your development lifecycle. It's incorporated into it, and you use those same tools to feed it back in. Right. It makes it, you as a project manager can track it easier and better. You know that when you're boiling down all the feature requests, you're also boiling down all the bugs and issues that have been detected concurrently using tools such as SAST and boundary testing. And as I always tell clients, SAST, do it early, do it often. Don't wait till the end and run it. You will not like the results. Okay.
Lather, rinse, and repeat. Yep.
Exactly. Yep. Eat this
Thank you,
elephant
Thank you,
in small
panel.
bites.
This has been very good. Andre, how did you get everybody else to answer your question? That was fantastic. Aaron from the audience actually was asking around a similar question, which I think that we've answered. So Aaron, feel free to chime in a little bit, but he was asking about, the professional criteria for secure medical devices and, are the requirements that are held near and dear to each of you. You actually, Sat, you answered that. Chris, you answered that. You've actually written in your book. Sat, you've actually implemented this in some of the training guidance that's there. Andre talked about this a little bit. To follow on and just to put in the panelists' minds, he was also asking about, does it matter for the class of the device, which obviously there's some impact there. So as we move forward, think about that from the question that he asked. I will do a small promo. I told you this is not a pitch, but we did talk about Parasoft, and thank you, team, for mentioning it in the appropriate way. If you want to learn more about what we do for Parasoft C++ test, you can go to our website. I'm not going to pitch it, and I'm not going to name a single feature. So there we go. I'm going to stop that particular part right now, and I will stop my webcam. And let me move on to. All right, Seth. Let's get back to you. Well, actually, today you said it already. I was going to say from previous conversations, I've heard you say that you can't take the health out of healthcare, right? And I interpret that to mean that the first goal of medical device developers is to solve patient problems, right? That's what matters. That and Chris's point about this is the business of saving lives, right? This is not about meeting some particular issue with code compliance is the utmost thing, right? We're here to create devices that matter for the industry and help people, right? It's helpful care. So that's a good thing, right? So health and healthcare, I guess that's a good thing. I think we'd all agree with that. But knowing that people, process, and tools don't change quickly, and that cybersecurity is here. Seth, think about what practical advice would you offer to the audience for setting goals around cybersecurity? I mean, well, what do you do, right? How do you start? You know that there's something here. You know that you want to. It's also a part of protecting your patients, because cybersecurity can lead to some pretty bad things if it's taken advantage of. Do you have some advice there?
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack. I just want to make sure that I cover all. One is I mentioned what the relationship of security to safety was, in my humble opinion. It's what I observed when I was at FDA. We didn't start there. If you look at the post-market guidance, actually, you can actually see what our thought pattern was roughly around 2015 is when that document was sort of congealed. it says that sometimes security is a safety issue and sometimes it's not, which is true. However, when you're dealing with a risk-based formula, right? Like this is, we're in the risk mitigation, risk business. When you think about security, I think about if you don't have hard math problems baked into the device, so literally, you know, leveraging the power of cryptography, that you can't be certain about things. And the whole bar for marketing, right, is reasonable assurance. Reasonable assurance and uncertainty are part of the same equation. You're raising the assurance level, you're lowering your uncertainty. And when you think about lowering the uncertainty in safety and efficacy, we get back to some of the things that Chris and Sat have done and Andre have done their whole careers, right? And that is engineer out flaws like buffer overflows as it pertains to a clinical feature, right? But not from the angle of somebody's trying to break this thing. Fundamentally different in how you protect that, and that starts with, not limited to, hard math problems or crypto, right? And that's how you have to get that assurance up. So the whole mindset change really is safe without adequate security, or without security at all. There is no reasonable assurance of safety and effectiveness. And that is a very profound statement. So there's lots of things to do with people, process, and technology, but until people understand that, then they're not going to turn on, they're not going to do static analysis, right? And they're going to try to pass it through the FDA review process until the FDA says, where's your static analysis, right? Until that happens, and reinforcing the idea that security has to be baked in from the beginning, we go as far as the FDA goes. One, I know I see people are really excited. One additional comment, FDA, this makes sense actually, because if we're in healthcare, that means that the design patterns are actually building security debt, right? And passing security debt down the supply chain. Hospitals, physicians, patients have to deal with security debt because we're clinically focused. That's not a pejorative statement. That's just how it is. So the FDA, like it levels the playing field for safety and efficacy, right? The hospital doesn't have to judge whether something's safe and efficacious. Neither does a doctor, neither does a patient. Hospitals, physicians, and patients should also not have to judge whether something is secure enough or not. That's prime principal job, security debt, tragedy to commons of the regulator. That's one of the reasons why regulators exist. One other point is Congress has to get involved as well. And you see some of the beginnings of that. End of 2020, the IoT Improvement Act, it was a bill that bounced around, I think, Warner and Gardner's office, the Senator Warner and Gardner's office. I think it eventually came out of the House. But it's basically saying, hey, by the way, if you're going to sell products, producers, if you're going to sell products into the federal government, we're going to create some baselines for you that you have to abide by. And that's the kind of influence that we need that is scalable down that supply chain. What I mean by that is you can't ask a hospital to necessarily spin up a pen testing team like Mayo has done. Well, they did it, but you can't ask that of every hospital, right? It doesn't scale. But if you can get it in, say, producer of that healthcare technology, whether it's, you know, a Cerner, EHR vendor, or it's a medical device vendor, or whatever technology the healthcare uses, that's the solution that scales.
Wow, like what Seth said, man, that's hard to improve upon that. And yeah, it's really tough. I mean, Mayo has 300 people there in their cybersecurity staff,
which is awesome. But why?
You've got some clinic out in the middle of Ohio somewhere where the guy who runs their IT is also the guy who mows the lawn. This is true, by the way. Okay, you are not going to get that same level. So first off, I wanted to address Aaron's questions, which is Amy, TIR 57 and 97, outstanding documents. Couple of years old, but still outstanding documents. Also, anything by the Health Sector Coordinating Council, HSCC, Greg Garcia's organization. By the way, he wrote the foreword for my book, so I get to mention that again. But it really is, such as the Joint Security Plan, JSP, excellent reading. Yeah, good stuff, man. All that is really good stuff to pull from. And how does it change between the classes of devices? It doesn't.
It doesn't. Best practices.
It doesn't.
Best practices.
Right. So let me give you an example. And Seth was kind of hitting all around this, which is I make a pole mount infusion pump and I leave it so you've got a telnet connection over the Wi-Fi interface that's there and I can walk into it. I'm not affecting the infusion of that pump, the operation, the essential clinical performance
Right.
I'm speaking Seth terminology here now. All right. I'm not affecting that at all, but I'm using that as a pivot point into the rest of your network. And so the ventilators down in the rest down the hall there, I'm wiping out and killing patients. Notice how it didn't affect the safety or efficacy of my patient, but it does affect the overall. So what I'm hoping for is to see some of the forward lights like Senator Werner make legislation and enable directly the FDA to handle cybersecurity. Not just cybersecurity as it impacts safety and efficacy, but cybersecurity. Clear the board, okay? I mean, make it obvious that is the inside of their charter to do that as well. It'll really improve the overall quality of what we do going forward.
And this indirect type of malicious attack, it's happened. It's happened for real. It happened in Europe recently. A patient died. So I mean, it's getting back to the manufacturers now. I mean, the business side of thing is starting to pick up and see that oh, we need to address this, right? So there's a culture change. We are seeing that change.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, thanks, Seth. Thank you. Great answer. This is great point about the class. You know, cybersecurity, it doesn't matter, right? You get inside the network, you can do damage.
David, just one other thing I think will be important, just to reemphasize, you know, where the FDA is going. Suzanne Schwartz already publicly said that they're getting rid of the tiering system, which was part of the 2018 guidance. The tiering system in my mind was an a priori risk category, which I may have spent some political and career capital inside the FDA trying to get rid of the tiering system so that we could go back to something a bit more holistic, right? And say, well, what are the processes that we need to put in place in order to arrive at a right-sized security architecture, right? So that we didn't assume that the risk from a already derived risk class, whether it was the class of device, right, 1, 2, or 3, or it was some other, you know, 62304's, you know, classification of software, that we could implement the processes, the new processes, you know, up into including like threat modeling, so that we could arrive at the right decision points for anything, whether you're making a CVS, you know, a thermometer that is being sold at CVS. By the way, I would like those to be accurate because I use them to judge whether or not to take my kids to the hospital, or it's a thermometer inside a class 3 device, you know, that's judging whether to, you know, deliver an electronic shock, you know. So it's a thermometer, but its use case is a little bit different. Let's have the processes in place to allow you to arrive at the right architecture.
And this is something that I push on all the time when I get the question of, well, you know, like you said, right? We have a class 1 measuring system. It doesn't even come in contact with the patient, right? It just measures something that the patient spits into it, or there's an IVD measurement, right? And then it reports a binary pass-fail criteria, right? What's the big deal? It's, you know, safety class 62304 is class A. You know, FDA level of concern for software is moderate or minor. I said, that's great, but best practices, you should never sacrifice on quote quality, because you never know the changing landscape of what that indication might be in the future. But the FDA might come back and say, hey, hold on, we found an issue here, has, like Chris said, completely independent from what your essential performance is, but they're using your device to get to something else, right? So I'm a big proponent of best practices. Just do it the first time.
And I mean, we're all the paranoid guys. We're sitting in the bubble, right? We're used to doing this all day long. But let me give you a real world example. Here, just after the first year, onboarded a new client, purely diagnostic device, purely diagnostic. It couldn't hurt you unless you ate it. All right. They submitted it under a 510K EUA, and the FDA came back with 24 cybersecurity questions, all very valid questions about how this was performed. It's like, so when you think about your classes of devices, don't think about classes of devices. Think about the impacts to your patient and the impacts to your business. That's what matter.
Okay, thank you. So I think we really kind of drove a point that, and it's an important point, right? So who cares about class? If this is going in as a medical device, you can't sacrifice quality. You need to be focused on the cybersecurity threat, because you don't know where it might fall in the chain or what might change around the environment. I think you all made that point very clear. It's a great point and a fantastic takeaway. So what's interesting then is we ask ourselves, okay, so as far as transparency, how do we know what hidden vulnerabilities will actually live in a medical device, right? So now, maybe I'll throw this at you, Chris. You know, so we've got vulnerabilities, but you know, how are we going to go about assessing this, and understanding this, what we've just discussed? You know, how do we go about it?
Well, the answer is vulnerabilities are, and I'm so glad you didn't say threats. This industry has so conflated the term vulnerability and threat that it's confusing. Really, the coin of the realm, what we are seeking as manufacturers, as we design and develop this equipment, are vulnerabilities. That's what's exploited. That is the root cause of all of these. So there are three places in your development life cycle that you can create vulnerabilities or instill them. I mean, it's not like you're trying to create them. One is design. I've mentioned this before. During design time, I decide not to encrypt something. I decide not to do authentication. All right. The other one is how I implemented it. I didn't check buffer overflows. I'm using predictive intrinsic values that I can do side channel attacks on it, those type of things. Okay. And the last is through the use of third-party software components, libraries, frameworks, operating system, communication stacks. Those third-party software components go in there. Now, each of those three areas have different tools and techniques that you apply to them. All right. Only recently, in the last couple of years, has the third-party software components. Please don't call it soup. I hate that term. It's so inaccurate. But third-party software components, we've started to get good tools to apply to it. The software bill of materials, the SBOM. Okay. By the way, ntia.gov/SBOM, great site. It gives you current thinking. The people who are continuing on Seth's work with the pre-market guidance are applying the work we did at NTIA into how to use the SBOM and how you create machine-readable versions of it and human-readable versions of it. The idea here is twofold. One, it gives your end consumers a way to look at your components and go, wait a minute, they're using something that just was disclosed. We have a vulnerability. Okay. That allows them to assess their own risk, because while we're the manufacturers, it's our customers who are at risk and their patients and their business. We don't want to shut down an entire hospital system. Okay. And so they get to assess that. Likewise, as manufacturers, we get to figure out where we have problems faster. When the Sventooth family of BLE, Bluetooth Low Energy vulnerabilities came out, there was a great deal of time and energy spent by manufacturers figuring out, not only in their current product lines, but their legacy lines, which ones were affected. And they were going back through and trying to figure it out. An SBOM, you would have it in seconds. You would know which ones were affected. And then you could start making assessments as to informing your customers, what kind of remediations, what kind of workarounds, what you can do. So these are the three areas for vulnerabilities, but I wanted to throw in third-party software components because it's a big one. As we've recently seen here, by the way, with supply chain. Supply chain's all the rule right now here. This is
right.
This is the year of supply chain.
Thank you. Guys, surprisingly so, we're nearing the end of our time with these folks. This has been an awesome panel discussion. I'm pointing to you right there in the audience. If you have not asked a question that you'd like to put to this forum, please do so. Remember that you've got a chance to win a book, and we don't have to address that question during this panel discussion. So please, it helps us also understand what's on your mind. What is it that is your concern? No matter how trivial, how you're getting your team up, what you're doing today. If you've got questions about it, please submit a question. We're looking for those, and you have a chance to win one of the fabulous embedded cybersecurity books. With that, and given our time, I think we need to do a wrap up here. So I think what I'd like to do, because I know that you all have a lot to share. I know that some things that we thought we would get to, we're not going to get to today. So let's just go around the panel. If you could just spend, a minute, 90 seconds or so each, just to wrap up your final thoughts on what you'd like to share. Just keep it brief. Seth, let's please start with you.
Yeah, I think we hit all my key messages, over and over again. One additional thing I'd like to share is about build versus buy decisions. So manufacturers are going to, because the FDA is asking for it, going to have to make decisions, and a multiple of decisions about whether they build in security features themselves and build up core competency to do that, or they go to a third-party supplier. Healthcare, honestly, is a collection of superheroes. They take on the hardest problems. Back in 1974, Medtronic put out a plutonium-powered pacemaker, right? Imagine the audacity of people. They're like, yeah, we're going to put an plutonium-powered pacemaker in people's bodies. They do not back down from hard decisions that you have to live with, right, and keep you alive. That is the equation, right? So benefit risk. If I don't have this thing, I'm not alive, right? So that forms how we think about build versus buy decisions. But when it comes to security, this has come from an organic chemist looking at the outside. I know Chris says it's easy. It's easy for him, but it's hard. And security is not kind. It's not kind to amateurs, right? And if you try to build that core competency, I've seen anecdote after anecdote, tens of anecdotes where people have tried to build out that program, build that core competency, and they ran out of steam. They couldn't get the funding year after year to get it off the ground and do it comprehensively.
Okay. Thank you, Seth. Thank you for all your contribution during this panel. Andre, you've been a little quiet. Let me just toss it to you. Any final thoughts that you'd like to share with our audience here today? And thank you. I'm seeing questions coming in. Thank you, attendees.
I don't know. I feel like we have a pretty good host today. So thank you, Dave, for hosting it. Kudos to you. Another thing I wanted to say is what Chris mentioned is baking the security in from the very start of the project. As being a firmware engineer in the past, I know that changing code at the end of the project is associated with a lot of paperwork, a lot of reviews, and it's just costly to fix something in the end, even though it doesn't, in your opinion, doesn't need to be fixed. It works, right? So incorporating those good policies in an automated way, baking it into the build process, baking it into your DNA, into review process from the very start will be a lot more cost effective overall in the grand scheme of the project lifetime. So that's my final thought. Thank you very much, everybody. I feel very honored to be in such a good community of panelists. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Andre. Yeah, the whole shift left thing is real. It is costly if you wait. Sat, let me get a few words from you.
Yeah, let's just summarize. So, from code quality perspective, right? Code quality, safe code, secure code, right? Let's raise the bar, right? Right. That's where we need to get to. I mean, we know we're in a safety critical industry. Number two, what you do for yourself within a business, best practices should always be more and be the high bar, not what the regulatory industry wants, right? Because the classifications will dictate what you have to do. For a Class C active implantable, yeah, they're going to ask you to do a lot. But what you do for yourself as part of your DHF cycle should be so much more that if you get audited, if you get questions, you're ready to handle those with clarity.
Oh, perfect. Thank you, Sat. That's a great point, right? You don't have to meet the minimum requirement. Do more, right? Be safe. Have a better device.
Right.
Be secure, right? Yes, absolutely. Thank you. And then finally, to our author, Chris, final thoughts.
Yeah, design that medical device like you're going to be on it or one of your loved ones. I've actually had that situation. My grandson was on equipment that I made in a NICU when he was born. So don't treat it like, you're not going to know who's going to die out there because of a cyber attack against your product. It could be you or someone you love. All right, treat it like, it matters to you as you design this whole thing.
Wow.
Lastly, Medtronic has been mentioned twice in this. I want to shout out to a couple of the industry leaders that are out there. If you think you can't do it, there's some 7,000 registered medical device manufacturers with the FDA. But we see some of the same guiding lights. Medtronic's out there, Philips certainly previously under Michael McNeil. All right, Siemens is out there. These are companies who are doing outstanding work. This isn't impossible. This isn't some mystery that you don't know how to approach. These are organizations that are doing it and doing it right. And unfortunately, so much has been put out there and they have such long lifespans in the field that you'll still see attacks on their products occasionally, but they are making a difference. All the new stuff coming out. Be part of this group, make your business better, be proud of what you do, make your device safe and secure. It's not that hard. It really isn't.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you to all the panelists. Really, it was my privilege to be a part of this today. Thank you for all of your sage advice, folks. If you still have time to ask a question, if you've got one. If you don't, you can email the attendees. You'll be able to find us through a little bit of web searching. It won't be too hard. We're pretty easy to find. Thank you for your time. This concludes our panel discussion today. We wish you the best of luck in your cybersecurity approach to your medical device. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Right.